Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step out for a walk and deliver an episode to you as I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Good evening, listeners. It's Brendan Riley talking to you on a pleasant mid-September evening about 9 p.m. It was a nice weekend, but I didn't get very much exercise. And I realized that tomorrow I'm going to be picking my son up after school, so I won't be able to record an episode to you in either direction, really. So I've decided to record an episode tonight so that you can have this. This episode is part of my effort to regularize the Monday episodes of the show. This will be the What I've Been Playing episode, which will appear each month around the midpoint of the month to allow for me to chat about what I've been playing in a bit more detail rather than having to wait until the end of the month. You'll get a little bit of this with the statistics episode at the end when I talk about my top of the stack and that sort of thing. But this gives you a chance to see what I've been doing otherwise. I've decided in terms of keeping some suspense about the top of the stack, I'm not going to mention whether I've played any top of the stack games or not on these episodes if I can avoid it. I may forget and mention it, but I'm going to try not to. And the idea is I'll talk to you about other games I've been playing, and then at the end of the month when I do the top of the stack episode, I will let you know how I did on that. Sound good? You have no choice but to agree. So if you're hearing noises, it's because I'm out walking late and there's lots of crickets out tonight. So hopefully that's a pleasant background sound. Whether or not it is not really all that important because I can't turn it off. So hopefully it will be. All right. Well, it's been a good gaming weekend. I'm looking forward to sharing that with you, but I wanted to give you an update on all the games I've played, with the exception of Top of the Stack, since the beginning of the month. So I've had quite a few different games I've played. Some highlights. I've played the Bezier Games Colony a few times. That's been an interesting one. It's a engine building game where you're trying to build a colony in the wake of a nanotech apocalypse. So that part's not really that important, but it does allow for an interesting mechanism. So you have some dice that you get to hold, and that you hold them in your vault. And each turn, you're going to get 3 dice that you roll, and those dice go into your pool that you can use to buy stuff. But what happens is you roll the dice, you pick one to keep, and then your neighbor to your left gets one, and the neighbor to their left gets one as well. So in a 4-player game, on your turn, you and 2 other players are getting dice. Then on everyone else's turn, the same thing happens. So you actually get a die every round, except for, like in a 4-player game, right after your turn you wouldn't get one. But most rounds you're getting a die, which allows you to plan a little bit, gives you a little something to do during the round. There's also 2 kinds of dice in the game. There's white dice, which represent stable resources, so things that have not been corrupted by nanotech. And then there are gray dice, which represent unstable resources, and those have to be used during your turn or you lose them. So one of the things the engines do is they will generate white dice or gray dice on your turn, and then some of them will convert one to another. And so the goal is to kind of generate these engines and convert them into points. And so some of the cards just get you points when you build them. Other cards get you points by doing things. And so each round, at the end of the round, you calculate how many points you have and you mark that on this little counter thing. And the game just goes until someone ends their turn with enough points to win. It's a nice little mechanism. There's no tiebreaker or anything because if you end your turn with enough points to win, game's over. So and everybody can kind of see what everyone's doing because of you have a vault where you're keeping your leftover dice that you didn't use. It's actually really interesting, and I like the mechanisms a lot. It comes with a whole bunch of different sets of cards. So the market that you set out at the beginning, there are like 6 standard cards that go in the market, and then 7 that can vary. And you can choose any combination of the 7 that you want. The game suggests, it gives you a bunch of suggestions in the rulebook, but then there's also a website you can go to or an app or something that will just suggest combinations to you. That's pretty neat. Overall, it's a nice mechanism and a nice game. I like it a lot, and it'll definitely stay in my collection. We played that about 3 times. That's Colony from Bezier Games. I did have an opportunity to play Axis and Allies again. My neighbor, that's one of his favorite games, or the game that he's played a lot. So he and I are trying to get together about once a month to play a big game. And we're alternating. It'll be like a game I have and then a game he has. And so generally the game he has is, at least twice now, it's been Axis and Allies. We played Star Wars Rebellion once, and I think we'll do that one again. Because the first time he was learning it, so he still won because he's better at these kinds of games than I am, I think. But looking forward to the next one of the Star Wars with those. But Axis and Allies, I did better this time than I did last time, but still my inexperience showed. It's definitely a game that's got established patterns of behavior, and if you don't know exactly what to do, you can really get rumbled. It also is unfortunately a game that takes a very long time to resolve. So he was telling me that often when they're playing around turn 5, you can tell who's going to win, and you could spend another 4 hours playing out the game to figure out that the person who was going to win at the end of turn 5 won, or you just say, yep, looks like that person's going to win, and you call it, which is kind of what we did. We played over the course of 2 evenings, a total of about 4.5 hours of play, and I thought that was enough for me. It's a good game, more interesting than my memory would tell me it was. At least the snooty part of me that likes all these hobby games has trouble thinking of an older game like that as pretty good, but it actually is pretty good. And while the dice are random, there's so many rolls of dice that the law of averages plays out, and it's really about strategy. And you can have a little bit of luck here or there influence the game, but it's never a huge factor. Or it's never going to be the thing that decides whether you win or not, if you got lucky in your play. So, Axis and Allies, fun. That said, I was the Allies this time, and so, of course, the Axis overran the world. Damn it. Okay. I'm stopping for a sec so I can look in the light. It is dark, so I'm trying to figure out what else I'm going to talk about a little bit here. I've had a couple plays of the simpler pattern matching games. We played Azul a couple times, we played Bärenpark, and we played Sagrada. All 3 kind of fit in the same wheelhouse for me as these games where you have relatively simple things you're supposed to do, but relatively complex ways that scoring comes out of those. I like all 3. I'm happily play all 3 anytime. Bärenpark is still my favorite of those 3. I guess I like the Tetrominoes. Azul is pretty. I think the different ways that scores are interesting, but the scoring doesn't vary at all. And I think that part hurts it a little bit over the other 2 for me. Bärenpark really is my favorite. It's got bears, for Pete's sake. Played a couple rounds of Rhino Hero, which my son enjoyed. He likes that one a lot. I believe I already shared... Alright, I haven't shared yet in an episode you've heard, but I've talked a bit about the game Nightmare, which is a 1990s VHS game. So I'll just say that we got to play that, and it is weird. Really fun. My wife described it as one of the weirdest game experiences she's ever had. So that tantalizes you a little bit, I hope. Just tonight, September 16th, we played a round of Gloomhaven that was pretty fun. Seems like the start of a new campaign or a new thread of stories, and we're excited to see where this goes. For those of you who've played it, we played episode 24, The Echo Chamber, and it went pretty well. My character leveled up. My Krieghart is now level 6, which means he is all kinds of badass. Being level 6 means that I can carry a third bag item, and the item I purchased to buy was the moon earring, which resets all of your other items that get used. So I'm just going to be using my boots of striding all over the place now. And yeah, my credit card is getting real tough to clobber, which is fun. So I've still got a while before I'm going to be able to retire him, though. Just the card that I drew for his lifetime goal is pretty hard to meet, or it has been. And so I'm working my way. I'm about 2/3 of the way there now. So, but that's still, we've played 18 plays or 20 plays of Gloomhaven, and I'm only 1/3 of the way, or 2/3 of the way. So it's going to be a long time. So I had two, what I guess I would call major or epic gaming experiences I wanted to share here before the What I've Been Playing episode wraps up. We played the most recent episode of Time Stories. My buddy Paul and his wife buy those, and they bring them over, and we play in a group of 5, which technically Time Stories is a 4-player game, but basically we just, each time we kind of rotate which 2 people are going to share a character. And because it's kind of puzzle solving anyway, it all works out fine. But my wife and my daughter and I play with Paul and Kate. My son doesn't particularly care for that game, so he doesn't play. But we played Brotherhood of the Coast, which is one of the more recent, it's the most recent episode of Time Stories. I liked it quite a bit. I would say it definitely depends on you having played the other ones. Some of the episodes of Time Stories have done decently at standing alone. You could play them without having played the others, but the last couple, I would say, really are leaning heavily on the series as a whole, and they kind of expect that you've encountered the other episodes. In particular, if you haven't played I can't remember what it's called, the 1960s one with the film reel on the cover, definitely don't play Brotherhood of the Coast yet. Those two lean on each other quite heavily, and in fact, I would really say you should play them all in order, because they all come back and they kind of weave together in really interesting ways. But if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about at all, Time Stories is a time travel game set with the premise that you are a time agent from the future, and you're being sent back to correct problems. And the way that they send you back is that you get sort of teleported into the brain of someone in that era. So it's kind of like Quantum Leap, if you remember that show from the 80s and early 90s. And you are a character then. You have a person that you are. You have their skills and some of their memories. And then you and your fellow time agents have to go and do stuff. The recent show Travelers has a similar idea of people from the future being sent into the past and occupying the brains of people in the past. So it's a good story, really interesting. We've enjoyed it a lot. Our choices that we made in this one weren't the best, but we had a lot of fun. So, Brotherhood of the Coast, recommended. Definitely, if you're enjoying Time Stories, this wouldn't be a chapter to skip. And finally, Jenny and I, my wife Jenny, and I have over the last month or so really gotten into, again, Arkham Horror, the card game, which is something I mentioned and been collecting for a long time, but I haven't really had the chance to play much. It's kind of a big game to set up to play solo, and I don't have a table at our house that I can just leave something set up on, so I have to be able to do it in one sitting. But in August, Jenny and I started playing Arkham Horror quite a bit. I think I mentioned that in the Top of the Stack episode, and we've now finished the Dunwich Legacy campaign. For those of you who've played it, we came out victorious. I won't say more than that, but it was quite a fun game. We play it pretty easy. We have one extra +1 in the bag than the game normally calls for. It is a wicked game in terms of luck, especially toward the end. As the game goes along, you add more tokens to the bag, and it gets to be pretty brutal. But the adventure was really fun. We didn't fudge too much in terms of important bag draws, and we had a good time, which is the most important part. Looking forward to playing it again. I'll probably play through the whole scenario or the whole campaign solo. I'll put together a deck, and it's interesting to think about knowing what happens now. What would a solo deck look like? It's got to be kind of a jack of all trades, at least on some level, because a solo deck that can't fight can get in a lot of trouble, and a solo deck that can't investigate can get in a lot of trouble. So looking forward to giving that a try at some point in the future. I think we also will probably start on Dim Carcosa sometime soon, although may probably take a couple weeks off now that we cruise through the Arkham Horror Dunwich Legacy pretty fast. For those of you who haven't played it, Arkham Horror card game is a living card game, meaning Fantasy Flight releases new packets they call Mythos packets, about once a month, and it runs in cycles of about 6 months. So they'll do a deluxe pack and then 6 Mythos packs to make up a full cycle. And in there you get cards that allow you to build a player deck that can do lots of stuff. And then you also get story cards that provide an event. If you're familiar with the Lord of the Rings living card game, it's a very similar model to that one. It comes with a campaign sheet that you can use to keep track of how your characters did. You gain experience, which you can then use to upgrade your cards. So there's a deck building element as well. Just a really robust and fun game. If you want to get a taste for it, Z Garcia has published a playthrough of the Dunwich Legacy game, the whole scenario, on the Dice Tower. Now, if you watch that, you get a little spoiled. I mean, you could watch the first episode and kind of get spoiled about the first storyline, but you can get a sense of how the game works, and boy howdy is it a good time. I'm really pleased that I've jumped into that one, and I'm glad it's continued to be so good and they're continuing to support it. The current adventure is nearly finished, The Forgotten Age, I think it's called, and the next one will be out, I'm sure, shortly after. So not a bad time to get in. I'm actually contemplating getting a second core set, because there's some of the basic cards that you really want when you're building certain kinds of decks, and they only come in the core set, and they only provide one in the core set. And you're allowed to have 2 of any card in your deck, so I kind of want to be able to grab those. But we'll see. I haven't fallen that far in yet, but I did eventually buy a second core set of Netrunner, so I'm sure I'll do that at some point with Arkham Horror. Well, that's what I've been playing. Pop over to our Boardgame Geek Guild 3269 and let us know what you've been playing. I'd love to hear what the pick up and deliver crowds are getting to the table themselves, picking up and delivering to their own tables. What would a pick up and deliver fan be called? I know you're small but mighty in number, and I'd like to have a way to refer to you. Listeners is fine, I suppose, but not all that intriguing. So that about makes it done for me. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Pop over to the Boardgame Geek Guild and let me know what you've been playing. And until next time, I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye. Pop over to our geek.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.